All right, everybody. I've got an incredible show today. I'm incredibly humbled. I've got two leaders in this space that mean a lot to me. But before I suck up all the air out of the room, let's get right to it. Oh, man. So I have Ed Flanagan and Matt Pusey from Era Group. Now, Ed's a returner, so I'm going to start with Matt. Matt, what are two things the audience needs to know about you right away?
Well, about me. So my background is in international business development. I grew up in Japan and I speak Japanese and Chinese. Is that two things?
No. That's just one. Don't you do that. Give me a second one.
The second one is that I'm all about the people. That's really what attracted me to the Era Group in my current position is relationships that I've had with previous people that are in the Era Group. And that's really what I continue to thrive on in the Era Group is working directly with people that have an impact on my life. And it's a great experience.
Love it. I love it. Okay. Now, Ed, for those who are not returners, who are learning about you for the first time, two things we need to know about you right away.
Like Matt, my training has been in finance. I'm a CPA with an MBA, and I transitioned out of that career into the Era Group, and I really enjoy helping our clients acquire new business and also help manage their projects and bring in all the expertise that we have at the Era Group.
Love it. Love it. Now, that was one. Give me my second one.
I like to play golf and be outside and play with my grandchildren.
So we got a family man, got a businessman. Incredibly impactful hour we're about to present to you. So, Matt, I'm going to go to you, right?
Yeah.
Last week, I mean, you talk about a turbulent market. If I'm a CFO or if I'm a business leader that has a business interest in North America and in the Asian market, how do I navigate this? Am I panicked? Where do I go from here?
No, it's a great question. I think that the first item is to really stay calm and gather as much information as you can on the situation, because there's always a way to navigate through challenging situations. And so the first is really gather a lot of information. I think one of the things that we discount sometimes are the differences between some of our cultures and business practices. And so understanding that is key to our success.
Beautiful. Now, I'm going to go to the practitioner here. Ed, you as a former CFO, you woke up this week, right? We've had some return to equilibrium, but not quite. What are you doing over the next 90 days to kind of prepare for what may be a very turbulent trade war?
I'm awful scared. Like Matt, you got to gather information. If I spent my career in the home building industry, so we were buying a lot of sticks and bricks. So I would try to gather inventory at the lower prices and try to see if we can get margins increased to cover any coming down the road tariffs.
Absolutely. So we're really, there's one part of it's like, hey, stay calm. And there's the other part of it is, yeah, but at the business level, I can't afford to stay calm. So Matt, from the standpoint of international business, what would CFOs and what would finance leaders need to be thinking about right now if they're doing business in the Asian market?
I think that's a really good question. For Asia Pacific right now, there is some volatility. I think we're all aware of the changes that are happening right now. But I think that one of the things that helps to reassure us is that policymakers, staying away from the political though, but the policymakers do want to make things better. And those that are all involved in that want a path forward. And so helping to find opportunities for individual businesses that where your particular business has an opportunity and moving forward. Another important thing that I've really learned in working with international business development in Asia Pacific specifically is a concept in Chinese terms called guanxi. And what it means is it's relationships. And if you can leverage the relationships that you have, you can gain key insights from those insiders in a particular industry or sector that can help you to guide you forward. So get to know those individuals that are on the other side of the ocean. Trust them. Work with them. And of course, you'd want to engage with those who are trustworthy. And so, gathering those that that have your trust and that you trust is paramount.
So I'm the head of finance. I'm leading the organization. I'm looking at my materials. I'm looking across categories. I'm trying to think, hey, how do I put the position in an organization right now to reduce costs in anticipation of what could be a very volatile market? Ed, how do they do that?
you need to review all your contracts. You need to tighten things down. You need to talk to your suppliers as far as there's a lot of times there's terms in the contract where they can raise prices. You need to talk to them and see how you can get things stabilized.
The problem, Ed, that I can hear with that is, what else is the head of finance doing? Do they actually have time to do that?
They got to make time. That's, the top of their priority list.
Okay. Matt, as a leader, if you're at the top of the organization as a COO, how do you work with your CFO to prioritize that when they may come back and say, we have other priorities, we had other things in flight, I can't get to that?
I think it's a good question. I think it's leveraging the team as much as anything else. I think that we have strong teams, and obviously as a CFO, you're going to have those, surround yourselves again with those people who you trust within your organization that can leverage, and you can leverage them. I think that a lot of people within a large organization in particular, it's important that we know what we have common goals that we're working towards. And so establishing those goals as a CFO, and then delegating what specific responsibilities the team can tackle, and then coming back and reporting back on those items that we think that are going to have the biggest impact. And I think another item is prioritizing. I think sometimes it's a start, stop, continue exercise. I think that if you can't do everything, truly, but then something's got to go. So something in, something out. And I think it's important to do that start, stop, continue exercise regularly within a large organization.
But I'm not asking that question facetiously. I know a little bit about the Air Group's business model, and I know that the start-stop exercise, it's always the thing. You got to react to the day-to-day. So as a CFO who engaged Air Group and then became part of, Ed, walk us through what that was like from an engagement standpoint, and ultimately what made you come and join the team.
17 years ago, I was a CFO for a home building company, and somebody from the Era Group came in to visit and told me about their process and how they can help reduce costs. And I basically said, that's my responsibility. I'm taking that on. He was very diligent. He came back 60 days later and said, how are things going? And I said, well, we got started, but I got pulled here, I got pulled there, I never got to it. And he said, can I get a shot? So I had him come in. He looked at 6 different expense areas. Within 90 days, they found $250,000 in savings. Now, if I had the time, I probably could have found savings, but I don't think I would have found 250. So it was a very good experience. And back in the 2008 and 2009 time period, we had the financial crisis with the mortgages, and our company did not survive that. So at that point, I didn't really like salespeople. So I said, if I want to be an entrepreneur and get into sales, you need a product or service that people need. And I found that service. And that's when I joined back in 2009.
I love that. So you actually are somebody who experienced the approach, which is, it wasn't part diligence, but it was really about expertise. And what you felt like at the end of that engagement was that this really made an impact, right? So you are someone who had a network of friends who were probably in the industry, people that you met at conferences, things like that, and ultimately found the ability to impact them. What are some of the areas that from an expense standpoint that a CFO really has blind spots on just because of the nature of the job, but that Era Group would absolutely be able to open up and say, hey, these are hidden areas.
Well, the thing is, in most industries, like with home building, you've got expenses that are major. They're called direct cost, the lumber, the drywall, the roofing material, and things like that. Then you have other expenses that are called non-direct or overhead expenses. And these are things that are not very big expenses, but in total, it can make a big impact. And those are the things that are under contract for certain terms. And these are the things that you don't get a chance to look at. And it's an opportunity to bring in a third-party consulting firm, that'll work on a contingency basis and really help improve the bottom line. And the other thing they find is they find a lot of things that are beyond the contract, where there might be, a 3% increase in the contract. And here the supplier is charging, 10 and 20% increases. You never get to see it. You just pay the bills. And a lot of times when the ERA group is reviewing these type of expenses, not only do they provide savings in the future, but they can find overbillings in the past that can make a big impact.
That's incredible. And one of the reasons why I was drawn to Arrow Group is around SpinView Technologies, right? So it's not just the fact that you've done 40,000 plus of these and have benchmarks and a lot of data, right? So I'm a doctoral candidate, so I'm always interested in research and data, but it's a technological approach, right? So you've evolved past the probably what was the foundation of the business, which is I'll take a look at the ledger under confidentiality, and it really have evolved into more of a tech company. And so, Matt, from a leadership standpoint, how do you see SpinView Technologies really impacting the market from an ease of being in the engagement perspective?
That's a great question. I think that the big part about SpendView is the visualization. What it does is it takes a lot of data. I mean, when a large organization, you're going to have a lot of data. And that's one of the big challenges that they have, is being able to visualize that and make it palatable to where action can then be made. And so SpendView helps to put that into the proper buckets so that you can then review individual groups of spend and be able to then take action on it. And I think that visualization is key to be able to take action.
Is it one part in the hesitancy, right? So we're all in business and in various industries, and you typically get a little bit of a rub at the very beginning of any relationship. Ed, for example, is like, I got this all taken care of. Person comes back and is like, yeah, well, I actually didn't get it taken care of. That rub there. Is the visualization one of the ways that CFOs can really begin to understand what's up under the hood of the business? And Ed, I'll start with you. When you first saw the $250,000 that could be saved, what were your thoughts, the initial thoughts you had?
Well, I was disappointed that we were paying more than we should have been paying. I mean, that's the obvious thing. And, you can't get to everything. As we talked about earlier, you've got to, have your priorities. And then if you have the time and you have the resources, you got to get down into the smaller priorities. But that's what I found. I was just flabbergasted that there was that much opportunity out there.
Pause real quick. So we're at what I call the end of the first quarter. So if you're a sports fan out there, we're in the end of the first quarter. I really want to take it back to the person. We don't have to always be about business, but the people that power the business. So Matt, let's go back to your career. And you've worked extensively in the Asian markets. And so what got you to the point where you were like, I'm going to take on North America and Asia together?
That's a great question. Well, honestly, it was, again, going back to relationships, it was Charlie Smith, our North America and Asia Pacific CEO. He's a fantastic man with a lot of years of experience, both in this specific industry and in our business, but also in Asia Pacific. And he really, truly understands relationships with people. I've had the opportunity to travel with him to Japan, to China, and to other locations where we were able to go on the ground, meet with individuals in these markets and talk about their challenges that they're facing and discuss how we can implement strategies that will help their business to move forward. In the Toyota manufacturing process, it's called Gemba, going to Gemba. And that Gemba Kaizen is a fantastic book as well. But that book helps to illustrate how going to the place of work where value is created and seeing how you can make an impact. And Charlie was a fantastic mentor for me, taking me at a young age off on business trips and helping me to really understand how to work with individuals, both in Asia Pacific and just in general, being able to work with individuals to help them, really truly help them, have a vested interest in their success, not just your success, helps to forge true and real and lasting relationships that you can then lean on in good times and in bad. Sometimes you have to have tough conversations, but that's really where the value of the relationship comes, is if you've done your work, that relationship and the challenges that you face will be overcome together.
Love that. I love that. And so, Ed, I'll take it to you, and you both are leaders in respective roles in the organization. Ed, I know that I've spoken with other consultants who see you as a mentor, and I'd love to understand your role in helping mentor consultants who are walking into a space that's desperately needed. I mean, so we can talk trade war all day long, but we're not talking about interest rates. We're not talking about the other things that impact the capital base of a company. And so, Ed, when you're in a mentor and a leadership role with early practitioners, what are some of the things that you think are impactful to help them really demonstrate the value of helping CFOs do better capital management practices through partnership?
The difficult situation, Chris, is that the new folks that come into ERA, they need to get some sales. They need to close some deals. And we have a service that everybody can benefit from. And the thing is, we don't cost anything. We're willing to work on a contingency basis. The thing is, there's a bunch of objections out there. And the biggest one is the people we're talking to, the CFOs, they're really, really busy. And you come in and say, hey, can we help you reduce costs? And they're thinking, well, that's my responsibility. I don't have the time. And you've got to overcome that by saying that we're going to do the majority of the work. We need help to get data. But once we get that, we're on and off. We're not the accounting group that comes in to do the audit and take over the conference room for a month and bug the shit out of you, which I used to do in my early career. The other objection is if we come in and hit a home run and find a lot of savings, how's that going to make them look? So they might be concerned about that. And then the third objection we find is the supplier relations. The suppliers are their buddies. They take them to the ball game, the cocktail parties, the golf outings. And the thing is, we're not trying to mess up the relationship. If they're happy with their supplier, let us confirm that you're getting the best price possible. So the thing is, they've got to overcome those objections. And, if you can do that, in most cases, you're going to get an opportunity to get in and do some work for the prospects.
This was really interesting. And Matt, I'll throw it to you, but I'm going to start with this. All of the human element aside, one thing that I know that could potentially be on Ed's resume is a decision he made that saved an organization $250,000. It's right there on the CV. Doesn't matter where we've gone. We've worked multiple places. There are certain things that we carry on our backs for our CVs. So in essence, if you're able to get around some of that human element, which is, hey, my friends, and you're able to get around the fact that like, well, hey, somebody else discovered it. What you're really talking about is Era Group has the ability to put some extraordinary bullets on a finance leader's resume. Matt, how would you advise if you had a CFO in your organization who was kind of a little bit too tight around the ability to manage what should be a major contribution to their career? How would you advise them to go about engaging in partnership discussions?
I think that's a good one. And I think it is a bit of a tough one too, because I know that those human elements are, again, setting those aside, but those are hard to ignore. But I think what it is really truly seeing for what it is, what they can contribute to the organization. And ultimately, if it's a better bottom line, everybody's going to be happy in the end. And I think that if they can swallow that pill and understand that the end result is going to be better financial situation for their business, for those that they report to, and just, again, their confidence that they can do that. And then maybe one additional point that Ed touched on as well is one of the concerns is that going to a supplier and saying, hey, we're looking to reduce costs. But in many cases, the Era Group is actually able to capture savings from incumbent suppliers. So we actually don't even have to make a change. And in some cases, you can even review quality and improve quality. And it's an open and honest discussion with a supplier of, well, what can you do? And in many cases, suppliers are willing to come to bat.
For those who don't understand the subtle difference, and it's an actual value-added difference between a contingent model and a retained model. Ed, can you walk them through the differences? So for CFOs who've probably worked purely on the retained model, the value of working under a contingent model.
Sure. The retained model is a consultant that comes in and they say, hey, we're going to do this work for you, but I need a fee to cover our salary. It might be $50,000, let's say. And with that $50,000, you're going to get 25 hours of our time. With our model, the contingency model, since we find savings 90% of the time, and as Matt mentioned, the majority of the time, the savings come from the current supplier, 2/3 of the time. So we're willing to work on that. So the risks for us aren't that large. If we dig a hole and we don't find savings, it doesn't happen very often, but the client's still happy. We confirm that they were in good shape. In most cases, we're going to come in and find savings, most likely from their current supplier. And then after we find savings, we stick around for 3 years and do audits each month to make sure the savings remain. And that's very, very important because a lot of times you'll negotiate a good contract And after a while, the prices creep up, and the invoices get sent into accounts payable, they get paid, and nobody's really watching. We make sure that those price increases do not occur.
So interesting. You talk about the CFO, and one thing that's always challenging. I'll take you guys on a little bit of a journey. So you mentioned the 2008-2009 financial crisis. I was working at Insight Technologies at the time. So my primary customer was a CIO or CTO. We were selling anything from like a Cat 5e cable up to a cloud solution. So really large purchases, really small purchases. When the subprime mortgage crisis hit, something crazy happened in our business. Small business, our SMB market, and our enterprise market simultaneously had a dip all the way. What we didn't understand at the time was that the credit markets had frozen solid and that companies were not releasing capital. So I would call my CIO. He had like a $450,000 PO with me and he canceled it, right? So my stomach's hurt. I'm depressed. There's a lot of things happening in my early career. And I asked what happened. And he said, our CFO is not releasing budget. Now, I'll tell you where I really had an exciting opportunity when I came across Ed. Here's what I did to survive that. I learned that the government was issuing credits, tax credits for green technology. So any and every PO that I had that had a technology component, I went and found whether or not there was a green technology component and I swapped it out. Then I reached out to the CFO of the company and was saying, hey, I'm working with John over in the IT side. Did you know about the green technology tax credit that would allow for you to make a decision that would impact the organization's ability to achieve the objective with the technology, and ultimately it would be tax deductible? Now, I'm not a tax consultant, so double check that, but the CFOs ended up opening up to me. And where I'm going with that, Matt, I'll pass it to you, is CFOs are not very much targeted. People are actually scared of that particular C-suite leader. But ultimately, it's not just the CFO who makes these types of determinations. As a COO, you're looking at it too, aren't you, Matt?
Absolutely. I think that, again, that's where an organization that has good communication across the board is important, so that a CEO, CIO, CPO, all these different areas, including COO, CFO, all the organization is talking to one another and finding those creative solutions. And I love your story, by the way. And that's really, truly an example of a win-win, where you were able to offer a solution and able to come to the table with something that really would impact others. And I love that story. It's a great one.
Thank you. It's interesting because we live in a climate now, and we'll address it at a macro level, right? So we've talked a bit about the business, but let's address the elephant in the room, right? Artificial intelligence has made it incredibly challenging to do business, because what you're looking at is that you have an organization that's simultaneously, or organism, right? So we're talking at a macro level, that simultaneously dropped the bar for everybody to be at the same level. And so it's hard for practitioners like you, 40,000 projects in, 1,000 plus people, 60 plus countries, all of the storied accomplishments you have as a brand get drowned out because everybody's using automation, everybody's using artificial intelligence. It's made it incredibly challenging for business leaders to trust. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring us up together and get on the table is so that people could hear us talk about our stories, hear us talk about our past performances in a way that lets them know that we not only understand it at a text-based level, which is a lot of way business used to communicate, but verbally we can express and articulate our understanding of the unique operating model between the C-suite's finance leader and the rest of the organization that spends money. And that's the interesting thing that you go with, Matt. So Ed, I'll ask you, when you think about the role of a CFO right now, what is the primary responsibility they have in this trade war, where you may look up and your capital isn't worth it what it was just 2 days ago?
I believe the most important thing is to secure capital, to make sure costs are under control, to see if you can offset some of these increases by increasing your prices and keeping your margins tight, and praying.
Matt. We talk about the ease of doing business, or haven't really touched on it deep enough. But I'll ask you, Matt, as a leader over an organization, it's not just the contingent model. That's one thing. That's right about it, but it's about the ease of engagement. How does an organization understand, or can you share with an organization how easy it is to get started in the process of visualizing what can be saved?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have recently launched, this is a few months ago, an updated secure portal where it has it's a basic landing page where it has an explanation of our entire process. It has visuals, and then it has an Excel spreadsheet that you can actually click over to that has both multiple sheets. One, an example of a completed report of what we would need, the actual data in the specific columns that we would need, and you would just fill those columns out as requested. And then there's a validation page that says if there are any errors in the page and the information that you've provided, and then a link. And then the final page is just a link to the guide and the explanation again, because if it's a large organization and you've passed it from CFO to another individual on your team and you've delegated that responsibility, they might not have that firsthand information. And so being able to then grab that information and then upload the document, and then we even have a team member dedicated here in North America that is willing to jump on a call and review and make sure that we are holding the hands of our clients all along the way, and that we would make sure that that is a smooth process. We then go through the information and filter the information and take all that big data and then crunch some numbers and help to visualize that in a Tableau style report that you can then is very palatable. And then again, it shows those big blocks of this is the biggest spend that you have and the greatest opportunity for where we might be able to find and reduce expense. And then again, it's very, very visual. And then our team goes to work. But maybe that's kind of the intro and kickoff there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds fairly easy, highly secure, but ultimately it's a marketplace, right? And you have those blockers. And I think, again, I want to touch on this because Ed brings it up as somebody who sat in the seat, which is it can be viewed as career threatening, even if it's career enhancing. And so, Ed, I'd love to understand from a psychological standpoint, why did you initially view that as like, why didn't I find that? What was that gut driver that led you to that assertion?
Well, everybody knows one of the main responsibilities for a CFO is to control costs. So, I mean, that's one of your priorities. And what happens is you realize that it's very time consuming to control costs, especially if your staff is lean. So when somebody approached me a while back and I said, I'm going to take care of that, and I wasn't able to do it, I said, well, what can it hurt to have somebody else, another set of eyes, come in and look? It doesn't cost us anything. And the only good result could be either they confirm we're in good shape or they find hidden savings.
How did it feel after you found the savings, right? Because I'm interested in the psychology. It's like, okay, now I'm taking the plunge. When you heard the savings, how did you feel as a CFO?
Well, I felt two things. I felt, geez, could I have gotten that myself? And the other thing is I felt happy because now I had increased budgets to cover, other expenses that we didn't have in the budget.
Let's go there. Madam, we'll go to you. Okay, so your CFO walks in. We got an extra $250K. What are your responsibilities as a COO when you're looking at, I've just gotten handed basically a new check in the organization? What do you do?
Well, it's reinvest, right? I think one of the things, and Ed talked about staff, and I think, again, talking about people, one of the concerns that we also hear sometimes is, well, if our group is going to come in and do an evaluation, is like, are you just going to come in and look and say, we've got too large of a head count, and then ask us to cut, and then that's an expense cut? And absolutely not. That's not what we're about. We're not about cutting heads. What we're about is helping to reinvest in the business. And so once we get that check and understand that we've got more to invest, it goes back to, again, where can we reinvest as far as in technology, in optimization, in some of those things that maybe we haven't even looked at yet. You mentioned AI. I think that's another one. I recently attended a conference at the IFA where an expert came in and talked about forming an AI strategy. And if a company doesn't have an AI strategy, they really need to look at establishing one. What is their practices? What are they going to do? And how do they invest? One of the models that's really important is having kind of a hybrid model. We talk about people of, these tools are great and fantastic, but the tool is only as good as the human mind behind it and helping to support and use that tool. So making sure that it's a hybrid tool, and then letting the teams go to work. I think if we tell people that we've got some additional funds that we can use and utilize and leverage to further our business, I think a lot of people in the organization would jump at that and say, hey, here's what would have a greatest impact. And then having that discussion at an executive level, reviewing what the priorities are, reviewing where those funds want to go, and then make a plan and then work on it.
Halftime. All right, so we're at the halftime mark here. I really love this, but I want to pull it back to Ed and really talk because it's one thing to deliver cost savings in a thriving economy, right? So let's talk pre-financial crisis and then in the recovery period. But when you're in the thralls of an economic crisis, right, and capital budgets are being slashed all over the place, money isn't worth what it was, the interest rates could be tumbling. I mean, just a lot of things that happen to the capital structure of the business. So Ed, in that tough time, when you made those savings and you were finally able to deliver that, of the 50 areas that Air Group focused on, number one, we want to clarify, it's not human resources that we're talking about here. We're talking about 50 categories. Did you want to know where else, or were you thirsty to understand what else could be done to help save money because we're in a crisis mode versus an economic thriving mode?
Well, Chris, actually, when the Air Group started working with us, I think they tackled 4 categories with a lot of success. And then the obvious thing was, can you look at these others? And I gave them 4 others, and 2 of them, they couldn't find any savings. So, I mean, it was confirming that we're in good shape. The other 2, they were able to find some additional savings. So in my 16 years with the Air Group, the same situation happens quite often. We dealt with a hospice in Delaware, and the CFO at the time said, can you help us in medical supplies? And the reason she gave us that category is she had just recently negotiated and thought they were in good shape. We were able to find another 18.9% savings. And she said, how did you do that? And the fellow that we had working there had experience working in the supplier industry. So he knew how suppliers price, and he had knowledge of the industry. He had benchmark data, and that's how he was able to drive that savings. And then since then, we ended up working on 13 different projects, and we saved them net of our fee $3.5 million.
Wow. But that's not atypical, right? So, I mean, it's one of the things you can easily go on the website, look at some of the case studies. That's not an atypical thing. When it comes down to it, an organization really needs to understand their cost structure. And we talk about it being the CFO, but I've got the COO at the table too. Matt, under what circumstances would you engage in analysis, right? Because it's delicate. You have a CFO, you typically delegate that to that person. But under what circumstances would you be wanting to understand, well, what are opportunities we have to save across the other pillars of the business? Because maybe your relationships across the C-suite are different than the CFO, who's just like, I've got the money under control. But a leader may come and say, hey, I need another $1.5 million. And there's nowhere to go. So as a COO, when would you engage a company like Air Group?
It's a great question. I think really from the very beginning, anybody that's in operations understand how challenging it is with logistics, shipping, storage. There's a lot of fees tied up in an organization within those things. And again, speaking of international business experience, it's important to be able to understand the shipping routes. It's important to understand the tariffs. It's important to understand, different fee structures of an organization. And so operations folks are often very, very willing to get into those because they know the costs and they know how challenging it is to be able to keep those under wraps. They see the costs continuing to rise. And so being able to have a partner that has experience in these different categories, and that's where being able to leverage someone else's expertise in addition to your own team, that's a powerful combination.
I like that. Ed?
I just wanted to interject with something. A couple of years ago when we were in the middle of COVID, as far as freight, the suppliers kept raising prices. They couldn't find drivers. They couldn't find containers. Prices went up and up and up. And then what happened is things stabilized. And guess what? The suppliers did not ratchet back the prices. So we had, during that time, 3 different clients that were involved We were helping them with less than truckload, and ocean freight. And in each case, we found over $1 million in savings because prices didn't come down. And we said, wait a second, fellows, we need to, make sure things are tight for our clients.
I told you all that $1 million savings were not atypical, right? So what we're really talking about is it's not just the CFO's responsibility or opportunity to deliver a bottom line increase to the organization. A COO of a company that has a lot of shipping and logistics complexity to it could also engage Era Group. And so I'll pass it back to Matt. Let's talk about the shipping and logistics. Let's dive in a little bit deeper. When you're doing international trade or you're sending goods across borders, why is it that shipping and logistics is a great area to start from a COO's perspective, engaging Era Group?
That's a great question. I don't mean to take this spin as negative, so bear with me here, but I think that a lot of international business sometimes in some cases leverage the lack of knowledge or experience in an organization, and they will take advantage of that. Meaning that if they can get a higher rate, then they will. And so being able to know what the competitive rates are and have information to be able to leverage that and say, no, that price isn't right. We really need you to get to X dollar amount for any specific service or fee is what's really important. I think in some cases, you just don't know. You don't have the information. You're trusting that whoever logistics company you're working with is getting the best rates. They're trusting their it kind of goes down the line all the way through the chain. And so it gets away from you very, very quickly. And so having someone who's an insider in that, who's gotten into the machine, so to speak, and says, this isn't right. These fees aren't right. This structure isn't right. This route even isn't right for shipping. And being able to then address those routes and specifically be able to talk about, well, here's a better route for you. Here's a better approach. Here's a better partner that you could engage with and offering solutions that are perhaps creative.
Ed?
Just to tag on what Matt was saying, we had a couple experiences where, as far as the routing, we would go out to the market, and let's say in the last 12 months, the client had 3,000 different routes from their manufacturing plant out to the clients. So we would go out to the market to maybe 6 different providers of freight, and different providers had different prices for the different routes. So we would give them a cheat sheet, and we would say, anybody going from this manufacturing plant north, you want to use this freight company. If they're going south, you want to use this freight company. If you're going west. So they had a routing sheet where they knew that if they had to supply their product to a certain client, depending on which location, they knew which company to use and take a benefit of the best pricing.
So the interesting thing, I'll keep pulling back to insight because I actually have insight into this business model. So when we were doing shipping of servers, right? So you think 100 servers for a plastic plant out in South Carolina, one of my larger clients, I knew who to use for shipping and logistics, one from a profitability standpoint. So now I have to sit across the seat as a supplier and, pull the dirty curtain back a little bit, but also which distributor to use because maybe it was a shorter shipping time. So the customer in some cases will pay more for shipping because they need it faster, right? So I could use an Ingram, a Tech Data, or a Synex in that particular case, but it's all about the conversation is really centered around logistics. And so we're talking about shipping and logistics as a company function, but we've touched on manufacturing. And let's get there. So we've gone healthcare, we've gone logistics, manufacturing. Now, if I'm Apple, right, I would be listening, right? And so I'm presumptuous. I want Apple to be listening to what we're talking about here because they're doing business in all aspects of what we're talking about. But realistically, manufacturers, those who are international in the Asian market and those who are domestic. Matt, what do manufacturing leaders need to really understand about where Era Group can come in and demonstrate here are ways to cut costs?
Is from an international perspective or
Yes.
from a domestic perspective?
Let's start at the international level.
At an international level, again, that's where we would be working with strategic partners that we would have, either that's internal here within the Era Group or those that we personally know and have connections with, to be able to conduct a review and just understand, are we getting the best rates that we need?
Love that. I love that. Now, Ed, we talked about this supplier negotiation, but we're not going to breeze past that. So you first talked about how a CFO might have a supplier that, let's take some golfing and things of that nature, but Air Group has a different relationship with suppliers. Can you describe why it is in the hospice case, for example, you go from a CFO feeling great, hammered negotiations, and you brought 18% savings to the table on that same set of expenses? How did you do that? Is it at the supplier relationship level because you're doing it at a macro? How do you all get to that point?
Well, the reason we're able to find those savings, Chris, is because we have to the market. We've done medical supplies for a number of other clients. We know who the suppliers are, and we know for a box of gloves, this is the price it should be. So when we negotiate with the suppliers, we tell them, the client's happy with their service, you've got good quality. The thing is, your prices are out of line. And the first thing they say is, no, that's not, they got great prices. And we say, no, we bought the same product over here, and this is the price we got. You need to sharpen your pencil, or else you're going to lose the business. And the thing is, Chris, suppliers, if the volume is high enough, they will not give up that business. They will definitely sharpen their pencil because they can't afford to lose it to a competitor. And that's why 2/3 of the time, the savings come from the same supplier. Now, sometimes the savings are so egregious, 30, 40%, the client says, geez, that guy's been killing me. He's been telling me for 10, 15 years I'm getting a great price, and you just told me they're 30% above the market. I don't want to deal with them anymore.
See, I wanted to touch on that because we all know, being in business, especially multifunctional businesses, disruption can be very chaotic, right? So sometimes it's not just that I want to make the decision. It's like, well, hey, if I introduce something that's going to cause a significant churn in my suppliers, that could be a significant disruption. Now, you have some existing supplies, especially when we talk of medical supplies. You have some existing stock of the previous stuff up until a certain point, and there's a little bit of anxiety there. But Matt, from an operations standpoint, when you hear a story where somebody's 30% over market for something they thought they were getting good price on, what would you want operations leaders to know to be asking a CFO on their team to make sure that that's not happening? Because that likely is happening more often than we think.
I think you're absolutely right on that. I think it actually is happening more often than you think. A previous company that I was with was a $2 billion organization, and they had so many POs going through their system that it was challenging for them to really go back to each supplier and question and pressure them on, is this really the proper rate? And so in many cases, they were not negotiating rates. Now, they would go out and they would get bids from 3 different suppliers, but once they decided on a supplier, they wouldn't press them. And in Asian business development, one thing I've learned is always ask. Many suppliers have wiggle room. And if they want to do business with you, as Ed mentioned, they don't want to lose your business. Therefore, they're willing to flex a little bit in order to maintain the relationship and maintain the business. And in some cases, really flex. But I think that in many organizations, because we're so busy, we get distracted with so many different things. We accept the answers that we're given rather than challenging them. And so having healthy amount of skepticism when we receive a bid or receive a quote or go out to RFP, we really need to challenge that in some cases, making sure that, well, is this really right? But without the backup of, as Ed mentioned, the information and in indices to be able to challenge that, sometimes it's hard to know. And so in many organizations, they don't have the information to be able to leverage that, but having a partner that is able to do that is important.
Ed?
Chris, the one thing that's important in negotiating for in the supply chain world is you don't want to have the person with the supplier relationships doing the negotiating. Because they're the ones that are getting tickets to the ball games, golf outings, and things like that. So you need to have somebody else. And the thing is, if they were to bring the ERA group in, we're a third party. So it's easier for us to be tough guys and put the pressure on the suppliers to get down to where they need to be.
Fourth quarter, it's time to put the pressure on then. And so I'm going to go back to you, Ed. Is it a personality thing, or is it really the role of a company like Era Group to handle that portion, right? Negotiations is not, everybody's not good at that, right? So we go back to car sales before I drop the question to you. You think you're getting the best deal. Most people don't want to haggle. They just hope they're getting the best deal. And that's where Kelly's Blue Book, all of Carvana, all of these different technologies came in to help people. But ultimately, is it best to have a third party in place that can continually, over that 3-year engagement period, ensure that you're getting the best deals across those categories?
Chris, it's interesting. We're working with a private boarding school in Connecticut. They date back to the 1700s. And they asked us to help them with their cleaning services. They really did not like the current supplier. So we were able to come in. We actually reached out to 12 different cleaning companies. And out of that, 8 of them came back and put a bid in to do the work. And we narrowed it down to 3 suppliers, and we checked their references. They could all do the work. And then we had a 4-hour meeting with the client and the suppliers. They all came in for about half an hour. They asked them questions. They told them about their reputation and their work in private schools. And we narrowed it down to 1. And they decided to move on with some nice savings. And afterwards, the COO came back and said, you know what? I really appreciate all the work you did. This was my responsibility. You took it off my shoulders. And she mentioned that she hates negotiating. She just wants, good suppliers. She wants good pricing, but she doesn't like to negotiate. And we're able to help her in all those things that made her life much easier. And it makes us feel great that we had some great results and a happy client.
Okay. So here's something I just grabbed onto. I fundamentally understand why you all changed your branding from Expense Reduction Analyst Group to Era Group. You just described to me vendor negotiation, vendor selection. Those aren't things that are typically expense related. They are more negotiation related. And so it appears that the rebranding is part and part so that people understand the broadness of what you all deliver as partners. Matt, give me some more. Like, what else does Era Group do to help in these situations? Because that was great. And I've never heard that story before. I've talked to him dozens of times.
It is great. It's a good question. So the Era Group does quite a bit, as you mentioned, of course, and it's a lot of areas that we work on are, of course, with suppliers. We, of course, work in those negotiations. But what we do is we are a partner across the board for any given category, any given challenge, any given expense that we would be able to really review and help. And what that looks like is that might not even be any one individual, but a partnership with multiple individuals. So, for example, it might be in the IT sector where we have somebody who is able to speak specifically to the IT challenges that an organization might be able to face. And having that industry expert address, again, from IT, from operations, from any given expertise, we can get into those conversations and help that particular company to be able to navigate those challenges. Another thing that we offer are just strategic partnerships. The Era Group has, outside of even our own borders, strategic partners that we have found great partnerships to where we have vetted these individuals and these companies, and we have trusted individuals where we can even provide, for example, expense in any given category, in taxes, in consulting services, in consulting on IT services, and other areas that travel, for example. So there might be another partner that we might be able to offer that an organization would have long-term benefits, contracts. There's so many elements to a business, and I don't need to speak to that because everyone on the call understands how complex business is. But an organization can't be an expert in necessarily everything. Otherwise, they are the best, and then they would have that in-house. But most organizations need additional expertise beyond their own borders. And so being able to leverage both the Era Group and additional partners.
Ed?
The other thing, Chris, is we're always looking at additional categories. We had a situation where we were working with a hospital group, and they had a situation where they weren't happy with their language translation company. They were spending over $1 million. They weren't picking up quick enough to satisfy the client and all the patients. So we said, hey, let's look into this. Let's look and see what other providers out there. And we ended up finding over 30% savings. And, now we are, experts in language translation. So we just had another client in the healthcare industry. They had a big spend. And now we're looking to find savings opportunities in that category.
It's like the human case study generator. Like, I mean, when you really think about it, like I hear millions, I told y'all, not atypical. That's the thing I want the organization to really understand, or excuse me, the market to understand about this organization. This is not atypical. And really what I'm hearing is that you all step up to the plate where needed. If it is an expense of the business, you all can step up to the plate. Matt, are there limits to where you all will step up to the plate? What are things that you're like, that's kind of outside of our scope, but we have partners for that?
That's a good question. And maybe I might even kick that one to Ed. There are limits, of course. We wouldn't want to go beyond our mandate as far as for what we're able to do. But being a global company, number one, we can leverage experts from across the world, and that we likely, in many cases, have a partner where we could talk to someone about a particular issue or a particular challenge that the company's facing that they might be able to reduce expense on. But it really more depends on a case-by-case basis. But Ed, maybe do you know any specifics where we wouldn't want to delve?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple cost categories that a company has that are very expensive, like legal fees, accounting fees, engineering. And these are areas that we kind of stay away from because it's, you got one accounting firm that charges $600 an hour for a partner, another one $400 an hour. How can you compare apples to apples there? So in those situations, we don't want to, get involved because it's tough to negotiate and find comparable services in those areas.
So we're getting close to the fourth quarter. We're dribbling the ball. For those of you who are Michael Jordan fans, this is when the steam came off the body, right? So you knew it was closing time. So I want to land on a very high note and really talk about the opportunity ahead, right? So first, I'm going to ask for the finance leader in the organization discussion. Ed, what is one thing that you would want a head of finance or a CFO to know right now about how fruitful it will be to engage the Era Group?
Well, I use an analogy, Chris, about I talk to somebody, I say, Chris, you look like you're a pretty healthy guy. Do you go out and get an annual physical each year?
Yes.
And why do you do that?
To stay on top of my health.
So I would ask the CFO, would you like to have an annual physical on your expenses? And the difference between what we do and what a real physical, there's no copay and no deductible.
I love that. I love that. Okay, Matt, right? So I'm passing the ball off. I don't know if you remember when John Paxson sunk that three to win the first three-peat. Here we go. Operations leader. How does an operations leader engage with Era Group?
Great question. So we really try to gather all of any given organization's, their top decision makers in the same meeting. So what we do is we don't try to silo the conversations, but we would rather have that all be a conversation together. And what's interesting is in many cases, some of the organization find benefit even just in coming to the table and having a discussion about some of these challenges that they face. And so the first step is bringing the teams together.
Love it. Love it. Okay. All right. So now we're going to move over to the golf analogy because that's what Ed loves. We're on the 18th green. It's time to win the Masters. We're going to let each of them give one final thing that the leaders in organizations should know about the value of approaching Era Group. Ed, sink the putt.
It's an uphill putt, 3-tiered green, and the wind's in your face. So I guess I would say, give us the opportunity to confirm that you're either in good shape or there's opportunities to find hidden cash flow. And if we're successful, those funds can be used for a number of things, adding headcount, funding a pet project, or improving that bottom line.
All right. So finance sunk the putt. Operations. We're going to go international business.
We'll do it.
International business leaders know, Matt, how easy it should be for them to engage Era Group. It's for the playoff.
for how easy it is. Well, certainly it is. So Ed mentioned that it's not atypical to see, we talked about how it's not atypical to see $1 million savings. And so again, for any organization, operations or otherwise, that's looking to do business, let me ask maybe just a question. I'll bounce a question back. But if you as an organizational leader had an additional $1 million to invest back in your business, what would you do with it?
R&D.
R&D, yeah.
Without hesitation, because it's tax deductible to a certain degree. I have the opportunity to increase revenues, to drive efficiencies, to increase organizational capabilities. I'd put it in R&D, and I wouldn't look back, because at the speed at which AI is changing organizational markets and changing dynamics, you've got to get something out. So I'll pass it back to you now. So now we've gone from the putting green, now I'm passing back you for sink the shot. International business leaders. Lay it on the line. Why Era Group?
So for international business leaders, why Era Group? Era Group, again, has 30 years of experience in international business. Most companies don't even survive 30 years of business, but having a partner that has walked the walk, talked the talk for 30 years with international challenges is someone that you can truly trust. And what attracted me personally to the Era Group and continues to reinforce why I am here are the people. Our global CEO, Mark Taylor, is a fantastic individual, and I won't get into it here, but we've actually recently, just at the IFA conference, won awards for Best Overall Business Award at the IFA conference. And it was a prestigious award that we are really proud of, and it's the people. And I have confidence in our people that we can deliver and make it easy and seamless and a great experience for any organization or business leader.
That moment at the end of like the NCAA tournament where the shot is sunk and everybody's running onto the court, that's what the CFOs, COOs, and international business leaders should be feeling right now. Ed, Matt, I want to thank you both so very much for joining me today. This has been incredibly impactful, and I can't wait to continue to have discussions. Have a great one, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you all.